Thanks for joining me, Steve, on our podcast,
The hospitality manifesto.
our hospitality manifesto. I don't know if anybody else is going to see this, so it might just be ours.
Hey, my wife is going to watch it for sure, and I'm going to make the kids watch it. So there's
There's
yeah,
like three.
three, probably all at the same time. So what did you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk today about not only we've talked about systems, we've talked about training, but I wanted to talk about the numbers. Right, the old adage is, if it matters, measure it, and I think that this is stemming from a conversation I had with a client about a week ago, and I noticed that they're in counting their food inventory on almost a weekly basis, and I made this scenario. I was like, well, what are you doing about the liquor? Like, where's your the I just looked at the priority shift, right? In the kitchen, for instance, they've got an executive chef who's been to school and been trained, and he does the ordering, and they're counting it, and they've got their checklists, and they've got those things going. But then you move to the bar, and there's almost little or no control.
Hmm.
Yes, there's a bar manager who's doing his order on a weekly basis, but there isn't that, like, the kitchen has the pass, and if you don't have a ticket, you don't the rule is no ticket, no laundry.
No shit, no shit.
And the
Right?
bar, it just seems to be so open.
Yeah.
And I know that when I was tending bar, or certainly when I was training to tend bar, we only had maybe one vodka in the well and maybe two behind me. Like, you know,
Well, it's because you're old.
well,
Let's be clear.
they may have only made one kind of vodka back then.
Hmm.
But if you had silver tequila and a gold tequila, you were fancy joint.
Oh yeah, Spouse of Silver and Cuervo Gold. Yeah, that was it.
But now you are expected to carry a number of reposados. Tequila has gone the way of Scotch, and vodka has got more flavors than ever. And so you get people say, "What kind of vanilla vodka?" And they're upset when you only have one. Really? Like, you know,
Yeah.
the investment behind the bar has never been bigger. And the point I was trying to make at the time, and that I wanted to see what your thoughts are, is like, look, if you've got $40,000 in inventory between the bar and the wine and what you've got in the liquor cupboard, shouldn't that be one of your biggest priorities?
Well, yeah, that's a significant investment, right? And what's your ROI on that? And are you managing that? I mean, if I put 40 grand into a stock or a mutual fund or whatever it happens to be, sure as hell, I'm going to be, keeping my eye on that on a regular basis to see if I've seen any return, right? So yeah,
Well,
I agree.
I know you've bought Bitcoin or one of those in the past,
Yeah.
right? Small investment. We don't have to say what or how much, but like, how often are you checking that?
Oh, it was easily every week, if not more,
But
because because I
but
mean,
and I know guys, they're checking that every few hours, right?
yeah.
Or they're checking the stocks every day, and I asked the question. I said, there, are you making five times your investment on the stock market?
Mhm.
And he's like, well, of course not. Well, said, behind the bar you are, and and in some cases you're gonna do it today. This bottle of Cazadores costs X number of dollars. You're gonna go through this today, and you're gonna make five times what it's worth. Yet we're counting. You're counting once a month, and then you're averaging it out. You're
Yeah.
looking at it and going, well, there's zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6 of a bottle there. And it just seems to me this is, if there's more money in the bar inventory than there is in your bank account, and you're checking your bank account every day, shouldn't you be shouldn't there be more priority into this in this direction?
Yeah, and I think too. So I mean, so to add to that, I mean, it's you can looking at your numbers and things, and in the industry I'm in now, we deal a lot with data, right? And and actionable data, right? And it's not because you can look at your numbers and go, okay, great, that's fine. But there's an acronym I use a lot with clients nowadays that I call DRIP, and it stands for data rich, information poor, right? So what that gets to is, fine, you've got this data, right? How are you using it, and is it actionable, right? So I think that's, you know, that's where we get to, if it matters, measure it. So you're measuring it because it matters. Now let's act upon that
Do
information,
something about it.
right? Do something about it. So yeah, so how do you do that? So is it, using that data to guide your decisions, right? But you have to be tracking it, right? So are your bartenders, pouring to recipe, right? Is your draft system working appropriately? I was in Saskatoon last week for work, sitting at the hotel bar, right? Order a beer, and they're, as you've seen it, tons of places where they're dump, dump,
The
dump,
knock,
dump,
the knock.
dump,
Yeah,
dump, right? And I was like, that is a lot of beer going down the drain,
for no
right?
reason. For no
Right?
reason.
For no reason, right? And I happened to be sitting there, and I'm like, oh, your beer's pretty foamy. The guy's like, yeah, I think the fridge is warm. I don't know. And I'm like, well, like, maybe somebody should look at that, right?
Well,
But
there's I see
in
I
my
see
head, I'm just going like, woo, that's a lot of cash, right? So, but you see that all the time, right? And people aren't measuring that and aren't correcting,
well
you know.
see I see
So,
I see that's a lot of cash and not a whole lot of giving a shit. And we need to kind of twist the dials in the other direction, right?
well,
And
yeah,
crank up the giving a shit, and then somebody's got to have a look at after this investment, because I think it gets taken for granted when they see so much liquor going out, so much beer going out. I have the conversation about Red Bull all the time. It's non-alcoholic. The staff should be allowed they're allowed to have Coke. They're allowed to have a soda or something. Why can't they have a Red Bull? There's no booze in it, because Red Bull's really expensive. Like,
yeah,
Red Bull costs more than a bottle of beer. I said, steal the beer. It's less expensive.
yeah, no, for
I'm not,
sure,
I'm not sanctioning that, but the
yeah.
point I'm making is that if you don't know it's missing, or you don't know that it's a problem, then how do you train against it?
Well, exactly. And I think this goes to sort of like, what we call, KPIs, right? Your key performance indicators for your team, right? And this can go, depending on how your business is structured. Are are your managers bonused on hitting revenue targets and hitting cost targets and that sort of thing as well? So, having the tools in place, whether it's, food inventory or kitchen inventory, food inventory or bar inventory, I should say, having the proper tools in place to measure and hold your people accountable, even on a shift to shift basis, right? Because if you have the right tools in place, you should be able to narrow down, right? Almost to which bartenders are more efficient and pouring appropriately and have less spillage, less QSA, promo, depending on what your budget is, right? But that kind of stuff's important, and it's if everybody says the restaurants are a nickel and dime business with really tight margins, right? So you cannot afford to not measure those things, right? Because you can't afford to watch those nickels and dimes go down the drain, and that's what happens when people don't monitor and measure specifically behind their bar, because that's where the cash is, and that's where your return is going to be, right?
Well, when you look at even a glass of wine, and these days you get 6 ounce, you get 7 ounce, or an 8 ounce, or a 9 ounce, and like, how's that being measured? And don't be wrong, there are several places out there that I can see that either they're using a scale or they're using a measuring device, which I admire, but plenty are not. And so it's really not much. When I look at booze, is a tenth of an ounce really that big a deal? Well, it's minuscule, it's tiny, but over the course of a year, you say, well, geez. You know, I've got one of the tequila bars that I work with. They sold 1,800 ounces of Casamigos Reposado last week. So 1,600. If they lost 10% of that or didn't get paid on 10% of that, that's thousands of dollars. That's
Yeah.
thousands of dollars.
Oh, for sure. And I think even just back to the draft analogy as well, because I think that's the one for customers. That's almost the most visible on where you see your bartenders now, right? So I mean, if your restaurant's running a 10% draft variance, which arguably is not necessarily terrible, right? But I know, like, we've seen restaurants with draft variances in the low 20s, right? But even a 10% variance, for every 10 kegs, you've poured one down the drain, right? And
Or
now
left it outside and just let anybody take it because you didn't
yeah,
get paid.
may as well let somebody. And if that, if you're carrying a bunch of microbrews or import drafts, you're yeah, hundreds of dollars worth of beer that you probably, if you are keeping your eyes on it and your draft system was running properly, that would be free. That's free money, right? Free money,
Exactly.
the best
And
kind.
and I often refer to that found dollars as free money. Why? Because you did everything else. All the other bills are paid, right? The staff is paid for, the electric bill is paid for, all that stuff is paid for. And if the only difference now is that you're getting paid for 10% more of the beer you pour, then you get that's 100% profit,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And outside of using somebody like me as a consultant to come in and help you find those things and teach you how to train against it, it's free forever. But the difference is that the ROI's got to be there. And sometimes that the it takes a manager to sit down with the staff and say, look, this is not a not-for-profit business, right? If this was Steve's bar, they got to understand this is how Steve pays for his kids' education. Like this is supposed to make money. It's supposed to pay his salary and his family and everything else. Like it's supposed to make money, and that you can be proud of that. It's allowed to do that. Like we're in this for money. But it's one of those things. I see the staff making $200 or $300 a night in tips, and yet the managers, the owners get paid last. Right? Business school teaches you to make sure you're the owner, make sure you get paid first. While the restaurant business is completely ass backwards, where the owners are the one getting paid last. Everybody else gets paid first. So, I think it's really, really easy for the staff to lose their their focus on are you making me money? We've seen top chefs, top celebrity chefs lose their restaurants. Why? Because they can't make money. They make fantastic food. They know all kinds of things to do with foie gras, but they can't make any money. So guess what? They got no partners. They got no restaurant.
So, and I even think just pivoting from the bar as an example, and you know, if it matters, measure it. Something as simple and easy to capture for a data point is your average guest check, right? And I think that can show you who your top performers are if you're tracking that. So who are your top servers? So maybe you're having a sales contest and you want to see who's got the highest average guest check. But again, to the free money thing, when I started at and it's not around anymore, so I can probably say it at Monk's, right? When I started as the running the dining room upstairs, one of the first things I had the staff start to do when they approached the table is, good evening, how are you? Can I start you with some sparkling still or ice water this evening? Right? As an example, right? And if 50% of the tables, said, oh sure, we'll have sparkling. Well, yeah, let's drop a bottle of Pellegrino on the table. There's already what we were charging back then, $7, $8 for a bottle of Pellegrino.
But
Well,
at
you
a
sit,
four top, there's $2 a head. Just went up.
yeah, exactly, right. And then so you have a couple of turns. So say you sell 10, 12 bottles of Pellegrino in an evening at $8 a pop. The way I always sold it to the staff was, how much is your cell phone bill? Right? And back then it was, $25 or something like that, right? But I said, just from you selling Pellegrino and you're getting, 10, 15% gratuity or whatever it is after tip out, that's money in your pocket from little to no effort. You're going to the table anyway,
That's right.
right? So I
Instead of
think,
just automatically showing up with ice water. That's right.
yeah, exactly. So I think when we talk about is it if it matters, measure it. Yeah, things. Yeah, your bar and your cogs and your pours and your recipes are important. Then things like your average guest check as well. So if you're not keeping an eye on that and then seeing who your top performers are and having them on at your busiest shifts as well, because you can maybe you have a lunch server who's got a pretty open schedule and can work some more peak hours, right? Maybe you want to have that server on in the evening because she's able to crush it and have a really great average guest check as well. So those, and again, free money. Like the customer's already there, and you're just helping. And maybe this goes, and we can maybe talk about this when we talk about sort of the training stuff. But that again is part uh, of that overall experience, but then tying that into your KPIs and your performance of your team and your managers as well. And I think something restaurants don't do very well in the sort of corporate world does very well is manage, monitor KPIs and tie that to compensation, right? And I think restaurants might want to have start to look at that a little bit more because those tools are out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those digital tools are there. You're all the point of sale systems that are out there now. Remember back in the day, it was we had PosiTouch and
Romanco.
Swirl and Remenco and PLUs, and they were. I mean, I remember when I started at a restaurant. This was I forget when it was, but we're still using 5.5-inch floppies to to program the point of sale system. So I mean, yeah, you weren't able to get all that robust data points that you can now. So yeah, I think for restaurants, it's frank. Oh, if you've got a relatively modern point of sale system, right, and you're not understanding what's going on with your food costs, with your guest checks, and at your bar, well, you're not capturing any return, or you're not capturing nearly what your return should be on your investments, right?
Well, and I don't think the restaurateurs, owners in particular, but the managers are the ones that are doing it. But I don't think the owners should feel guilty or bad about coming to the table saying, "I'm looking for the money." And I've made the same example. If you were a waiter and you sold $1,000, you expect to walk with at least 10%. You expect to walk with $100.
Yeah.
Okay. If you didn't, what would you do?
Well, I go around looking like, did I drop a $20 bill somewhere?
That's right, because you say to yourself, well, geez, I got tipped pretty well all night.
Yeah.
Did I over tip out? Is there a mistake? Did I leave some money on the table? I mean, this was certainly easier to do when we saw more cash, and right now everything's in debit and stuff. But if I sold $1,000, I expect to walk with 100. So where's my money? Well, the same, and waiters have no guilt whatsoever about coming back saying I thought I made more money than that. I've had 100 waiters come to me and say, hey, Robin, I don't think something wrong with my cash out. I thought I made more money than that. So what's wrong with the owner going to the team and saying, team, over the course of this week we sold $100,000. Not a bad number. Okay, any place selling that kind of money, but for $100,000, I should have this much profit, and it's this much.
Yeah.
So where's my money? Right? It's your people. You guys are all the ones out there taking the cash. You guys are the ones out there working with the customer and delivering the product. What happened to all the money? Because if things went according to the plan, the written plan, then I should have made this much money, this much, nice big pile. But now I either that, or in some cases there's no pile. Mm-hmm. So where is it? And I don't know why owners are so reluctant to be protective of that profit. I think that they need to be more protective of it. And a lot of that comes down to measuring. Say, look, it's tough to go back after a course of a week and find out what all your money went. Especially if you are not looking after the product and counting it and saying, where did that go, when, where? Because it's no longer the day when you could look into the cash register, and if it was full, you had a good day.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
Yeah.
But it's more than what the computer tells you how much you should have made.
Oh yeah.
Right. There isn't a POS out there that you can't put the cost and value of all your products. So as it goes out the door, it knows that costs $3 and you're charging 19, whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I like to use the analogy of how much do you spend on your security system? Like, so you've got whatever security company happens to be monitoring your restaurant, and it's monitoring it when the doors are closed and it's overnight, and there's no revenue coming in. You're paying that monitoring company to make sure your restaurant is safe and secure in the chance that somebody tries to break in and rip you off, right? But I think you have more chance of losing money and losing revenue when that alarm system is turned off and you're open and running, right? So if you think, well, okay, I'm spending $200 a month on my alarm monitoring, right? But is that $200 necessarily well spent? I mean, if you're not getting broken into, and fine, then it's a fixed overhead cost. But does it make sense if you're doing that, but you're not monitoring what's going on in your bar or in your kitchen every day, and when you're open and where that money's going? Well, and I think you're only monitoring your restaurant half the time, right? So
or
and I
even
think
10% of the time.
I don't know. I think owners are like, well, that's going to cost money to do that. I'm like, yeah, but it's an investment in guaranteeing your profitability is what it is, to monitoring your inventory and measuring it sometimes
Because it's
daily.
not just malicious. Like when we talk about the alarm system, the mental image, somebody kept breaking in and stealing your stuff. And while that happens, and then while you're open, there is an element of theft. Drinks that people know they should have rung in and paid for go out. Staff beverages after work that they know they're not supposed to have, that they have. But I find that the vast majority of the profit losses are training issues, right?
Yeah,
People don't realize that they're pouring more than they should be, or that they're not good at pouring draft. Pouring draft is simple, but there's a right way and a wrong way.
yeah,
So, but managers need to be able to identify that, that person is not great at pouring draft.
mhm,
And instead of just saying they're not allowed to pour draft anymore, teach them. Teach
yeah.
them.
Measure it, right? Yeah, and if you don't know what your cogs are on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, well, that's a problem, right? And then what is your never mind your cogs, but what's your actual variance on your bar? Because that's the money that's gone and you're never getting it back. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not about theft. It's about and I think as we go through this podcast process here. I think our hospitality manifesto is going to come back to systems, systems, and standards, right? And I think if you don't have those in place and you go, oh, where's all my money gone? Well, you didn't have the systems in place. You didn't measure it. You didn't track it. And when you didn't do that, you can't action any corrective measures to your team,
Well,
right?
when you say to yourself, where'd my money go? My question is, why don't you know? Why don't you know?
Yeah,
Because you're not watching it. And hey, you know, that's my business. This is all I do now. 30 years of running the dining room. This kind of work is all I do now, is helping restaurants look at their systems and look at their bars and find out where the holes are, so at least they can identify where the problem is. Because I get it. It's big, and where do I start? And I don't know where to look, and it's big.
yeah,
But even if you don't want to get a guy like me to come in and generate that information, then you got to have somebody on your team doing it. And
yeah,
if they're great at it and you're getting the numbers and they're accurate, then keep up the good work. But if you're
yeah,
not getting it, and I'm talking specifically about the bar, but the same is true in the kitchen. If you are not looking at those numbers on a weekly or at least every 2 weeks, depending on your sales, I think you're missing a real opportunity.
Oh, for sure, right? And like I said before, it's a nickel and dime business, and especially nowadays. I mean, like you have to spend money on, social media marketing. You have to spend money because everybody's paying by credit card. So, and if people are paying with the points cards that have a transaction fee of 2.5%, 3%, well, that's money directly out
I've
of your
seen
pocket.
cards up to 5%. I've seen
Yeah,
cards up to
right.
5%.
So yeah, the restaurants, it's death by a thousand cuts, right? So you have to stem that bleeding somewhere, and you do it through measuring what is in your building and what you can control. And yeah, you do that through having those systems in place. And yeah, if it matters, measure it.
There's the lesson. There's the lesson.